But today's daf in Masechet Bava Metzia is daf Ayin Daled 74, and this is the second to last day in Masechet in the parak Ezu Neshach. So, our Mishnah. We're actually going to bring this full circle today, but our Mishnah, we're up to the top line, Amar Rava, top line of daf Ayin Daled Amud Aleph. So remember, our Mishnah is discussing this whole concept of buying things for the future, right? So you give money now, either to lock in a price or to lock in a better price. You take delivery at some point in the future. And the basic principle is that if there's a market rate now, you can do that. Meaning I could say, there's food for sale now. This is the rate. Deliver it to me in 3 months, but give me the rate for today. That's fine. If there's no market now, it's a problem. It's called sa'ah b'sa'ah. But the Mishnah came out with an interesting case. If the person who you're giving money to is the first producer to finish that year, so there's no market yet, but they already have the things in their possession, then it might be okay, right? Even though there's no market rate yet, the fact that they have the thing in their possession makes it okay. So we're going to discuss that more today. But before we get there, the top line, Amar Rava, is a case that is actually a continuation from yesterday. So says Rava on the top line, Hani Beit Tlata, Diyavi Zuze Lechad, right? This is a continuation of the case yesterday where you gave money to someone to buy wine for you and they overslept and didn't buy it. Here's a variation of that. You have 3 people who give money to an agent to go buy. He's going to the fair and he says, here's $100. Each of them give him $100. Buy us, whatever, some material that you can get there, wine, let's say. But he only buys it for one of them. Zavan lechad minayo. He comes back, he says, I got wine, but I didn't buy it for all of you. I decided I only want to do business with Ruvain. Says Rava, it doesn't work that way. Zavan lekulu. They didn't make a condition. He took money from all of them. He's an agent for all of them, and he bought it, and you split it between the 3 of them. But lo amran, that's only if they gave him money collectively. Where they didn't each, tsar, wrap and seal and give them a bundle of money for Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi. If they did that, if each one gave him money sort of individually wrapped, then he can say, I only took one of the amounts of money. So it's not communal money. It's for each person. If I took $100 from one person and bought $100 of wine, all of that material goes to that person. Laman de zavan, zavan. Laman de lo zavan, lo zavan. For the one he purchased, he bought it. And the one he says he didn't buy it, he didn't buy it. So that's just, again, a detail on how you understand the shliach.
He has to return the money to the other people.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. They don't want the money back. They want the wine, right? They gave him the money because they can have money here. They don't have wine. But yes, he doesn't. He has to give back the money, of course.
Without interest.
Amar of Papi, no interest. Amar of Papi Shmei de Rava. Hi situmta. Now, situmta, Rashi explains, is where you make a mark, where basically you go to the warehouse, and you say, I want to buy 10 barrels of wine, and I run a store, so deliver them once a week for the next 10 weeks. But I want to make a note of which barrels of wine, because I don't want you to sort of either give away my barrels or switch them or run out. So I make an X, let's say, situmta just means a mark of whatever stamp of the store, on 10 barrels. Says Rava, Rav Papa, in the name of Papi, in the name of Rava, that's a kinyan. It seems pretty strange. You didn't pick anything up. You didn't own it. Like, what do you mean it's a kinyan? Lamai hilchata. What does it mean it's a kinyan? For what practical purpose? Rav Chaviva says, no, the miknaya mamish. That's a real kinyan. That the fact that you agreed to this, we'll see in a second, makes it a kinyan. Rabbanan Amar, no. It's not a real kinyan. And the guy can always back out and say, I changed my mind. Here's your money back. I don't have any barrels for you. Or I sold your wine to someone else. And here's your money. Of course, you have to pay him back. But you are likabuli ala mishapara. Right? Remember, there's the halacha we had earlier very extensively, is that there's a curse, essentially. Mishapara midara mabal, right? The one who collected from the flood generation, meaning God, should curse you because you went against your word. So if you just say, I want 10, that's not considered to be anything. But if you make a mark, then at least you sort of locked it in for some purpose so that if the seller backs out, he is over the curse of Mishapara. But it's not a real kinyan. You can't enforce it. The hilchata, in fact, the halacha is, and now, the kabuli ala Mishapara, that making a mark does not actually make a real kinyan, but it does make the seller on the hook for the curse of Mishapara. However, and this is a super practical line the Gemara throws in, if the communal expectation in that neighborhood is that this is a kinyan, then it's a kinyan. And this basically, leads to one of the principles, which again is very hard to understand how to apply it, that really kinyanim of money, right? Because money specifically is based on communal norms. And if the agreement here is without a kinyan, right? The Torah says you got to pick something up to make a kinyan. The Torah says you got to own the neighborhood. But if this community, this place, the custom is universally accepted that this is a kinyan, then it's a kinyan. Right? There's a huge debate. Is that because the Hefker Bezdin Hefker? Is it because Din de Malchuta Dina? Right? There's all kinds of possibilities, but that is the klal of our Gemara, and it obviously has huge implications for business.
But the money wasn't transferred, was it?
The money was transferred, but remember, money does not have a huge impact. Ma'ot are not konot, if you recall.
No, but in this case, with the Situmta, did he actually transfer? Did he pass the money?
So he did pass the money, but the problem here is there's a couple of problems. He did not. I take it back. In this case, he did not pass the money.
I didn't think so. So
Yeah,
then what was the Kenyan?
So there was no kinyan.
He didn't pass the money, and the other person didn't pass the.
Well, we'll see. Remember, money's not a kinyan either, except according to Rabbi Shimon. We're going to actually discuss that a lot today. But you're right. But with money, you for sure have misha para, right? That's what we discussed earlier. If you give money, even if it's not a kinyan, at least it makes you on the hook for this curse. But yeah, there's no money here, but you made a mark. So the question is, what impact of that mark is that acceptance that this is going to be your barrel or not? And what the Gemara is saying is that it's at least an acceptance that I'm going to give it to you, and if I don't, I'm unethical, right? But according to the end of the Gemara, if it's a neighborhood where that's enough to make a kinyan, then that's it. It's like the handshake, right? There are places where you make a handshake, no one passed any money. I committed to $1 million of a deal and I can't back out.
There was no exchange of it. One didn't pass the money and the other didn't pass the item. So there was no exchange yet.
Correct. That's the Gemara's question. The answer is that either it's a moral obligation, or in fact, if you're in a neighborhood where this is enough to make a kinyan, this is what people have accepted and said, once someone does this, I accept that this is a kinyan, that's enough. If it's the custom, not the custom, like the practice, that's sufficient to require you to accept delivery and to pay. Two dots. Now, this is back
yeah, but he still, person number one still has to give the money, right?
Of course. Says the Gemara to two dots, right? This is our Mishnah said, what if there's no market rate yet? Hayahud chilat the kotzrim, right? So the question is, remember we said, if there's a market rate, you can buy things for the future. Here, there's no market rate, but you have the material. So we said, if you have the material, then you're allowed to do it. If I have grain, I could say, I'm buying grain today, and you deliver it to me in a couple months, right? Says the Gemara, Amar Rav. But no, then our Mishnah said, what if you're the first person? So then we said in our Mishnah, just going back to our Mishnah a little bit, 2 days ago, our Mishnah said it depends on what does that mean you have the grain, right? When in the harvesting process, obviously when you cut your grain, it's not final product yet. You have to winnow it and crush it and whatever, throw it up in the air. All of those processes have to happen. So when is it considered to be present so that you can make a deal on it? So says Rav, let me tell you the rule. The rule is mechusar shtayim posek. If anything is missing 2 steps before the final product, then you can make a deal because it's close to being finished. So then you can make a deal. It's as if you already have the finished product and you can make a deal for the future. But if you're missing shalosh, if you're missing 3 steps, eno posek. This was Rav's principle. It's 2 steps are okay, 3 steps are not okay. Shmuel said, no, I don't think it depends on the number of steps. It depends on whether you are able to complete those steps. If it's bidei adam, if a person can do them, if they're sufficiently motivated, afilu mea posek, even if there's 100 steps, the fact is that it's all in my control. I have the grain, I just have to go through the process of processing it and winnowing it, etc. But that's all things I can do. Growing, of course, is not in my control, right? So if it's seeds, I can't control that. So I can't make a deal. But if it's in my hands to do it, afilu mea posek. But if it's bidei shamayim, if it's through things that are natural, or we call them bidei shamayim, then afilu achat eno posek. Even 1 step, I can't make a deal because I can't count on that step happening. It's not in my control. So that's the machloket Rav and Shmuel. That's not.
We cannot guarantee, even if he's 1 step away, there will not be a flood or someone will not rob his storehouse tomorrow.
Correct, but that's not a problem. You can sell. We don't say that's a problem at all. If you have grain in your house, you can sell it, even though, of course, that grain might be destroyed, right? So that's not a problem. But the point is, the grain doesn't exist yet. but it's one step away, or the flour doesn't exist, let's say. But you're one step away from flour, or 2 steps according to Rav, that's okay. According to Shmuel, you can be 50 steps away as long as you can turn what you have into flour. It's not. Now, let's understand our Mishnah, because our Mishnah had very specific cases, and we'll see if they fit according to Rav and Shmuel. The Mishnah said, now we're quoting, Posek imal hagadish. You have a haystack, right? So your grain, you just cut it down, you stack it up in the field to dry. It's not anywhere near flour. You can be posek on that thing and saying it's going to turn into flour and I could sell it to you at a certain price. Ask the Gemara, how could that be allowed according to Rav? You're missing many steps. You're mechusar. Now, I'm going to go through the Gemara steps of how you process grain. I don't know this from firsthand experience, but you're mechusar mishdei b'chama. First thing you have to do is you have to let it dry out in the sun, right? Once you harvest it, it's moist. It's not ready to be winnowed yet. You got to dry it and lemevash, sorry, in order to dry, right? So that's one step. And meidash, you have to then thresh it. You have to step on it, right? Or crush it with an animal to get loosened up the grain. Umidra, and then you have to winnow it, where you throw it up in the sky and the chaff blows away and the grain comes down, right? So that's 3 steps before you get into the kernels. So how could Rav say that that's a good deal? And it's talking about a case where it's already been drying. When we say it's in a haystack, it's already a haystack where it's drying. So you already did that first step. You go into Shada B'chama V'yivash, you already dried it out in the sun, so you're only missing 2 steps. Says Gemara, well, Shmuel, now what about Shmuel? Shmuel said it doesn't matter how many steps, it matters whether it's humanly possible or it's natural phenomena. Remember, when you throw it up into the air for it to winnow, it doesn't just winnow unless there's wind, right? If it's not a windy day, you can't do it. If it's no wind and you throw grain up in the air, it'll just drop right back down, right? So I'm a chusr midra. You don't have control over the winnowing, right? Because it's a natural, it's a godly thing, it's a natural thing. So how could you sell it if you don't have control over that step?
Wait till it's a windy day.
Well, but that's B'dei Shamayim, so you never know when it's a windy day. That's Shmuel's whole point, is I can't sell it if I can't control it. Answers the Gemara, well, you could buy a fan, right? No, they don't answer that because they didn't have that. They didn't have electricity. But Avshar ben Nafvata, you can winnow it with a sieve, right? You can do it by hand. It's not only wind that does it. It's obviously a lot more work to do it by hand, but it's conceivable that you can do it, and therefore you're allowed to sell in those conditions. Okay, the next case in the Mishnah was Alavitcha Anavim. You can sell an avit, which is a large container, like a vat of grapes, right? Now, vat of grapes, right, is not yet wine because it's missing several steps. It's missing hamachusar michmar. The first step is that michmar, which Rashi explains is they warmed it up, meaning they heated it up so that it's sort of not boiled, but like, rotted almost a little bit. And the grapes became soft so that when you stepped on them, you were able to get a lot out of them, but you can't just step on raw grapes, right? So you have to let them heat and sit there in the juices and get a little warm. That's one step. And then once that happens, you have to bring them up to the press. Ayula lebe matzart. You got to carry them from that container and move them into the wine press. And then you have to be meidash. Then you have to step on them. And then mingan, and then you have to squeeze them, right? So it's mingan doesn't mean squeeze them. It means pulling them out of the pit, meaning you step on them, the wine drops into the pit. Then you got to draw it out of the pit, right? Which, of course, these are all steps of work. So how could you sell it if you got really 4 steps here? Says the Gemara, Kiditani Rabbi Chia. It's talking about the case Rabbi Chia says is going to the next case in the Mishnah, that it's in fact talking about al komer shel zaitim. Rabbi Chia said the next case of zaitim was talking about komer, which means that they're already warmed up. The komer is the next step. They're not just raw olives. They're olives that have been soaking for a while. Hachanami al komer shel anavim. Here too, you'd be talking about grapes that were already soaking for a while. But so what? It's still missing 3 steps, right? You have to step on them. No, you have to move them from the container to the the crushing floor, right? Wine press. And then you have to step on them, and then you have to draw them out of the pit. HaMechusar Tlat says, well, it's talking about the Atra, the Hudazavan Hudanagid. It's talking about a neighborhood where the custom was that you sold the wine in the pit. And the guy who bought the wine, who say, I bought, 3 barrels of wine from you, he would go or she would go and draw it out of the pit themselves. So you actually didn't have to, the seller didn't fulfill the step of taking it out of the wine pit and putting it into barrels or into glasses, whatever. That was the buyer would do that. So therefore that step is not missing and you're only missing 2 steps.
Take them out of Rashi system, shoka and elabor, difnei agat, into the pit.
That's the earlier step. That's the earlier step.
That's menaged.
Sorry?
That's minaged. The Meidash Lemonaged. Rashi says Limshoch Hayayin El Habor
Right.
into the pit.
So no, so that's again, there's different pits. There's a pit where you put the finished product, right? And there's the pit which you drain into when you actually step on them.
Okay, but this is the third step according to Rashi.
Correct. So the point answer is that this is a case where that third step is being done by the buyer. So the seller is only missing two steps. The two steps of the seller
Right.
carrying it from the containers where the grapes sort of not rot, but like stew a little bit.
Right.
That's one step into the pit, into the not a pit because you can't put them in the pit. You put them on the wine press, and then
Right.
you actually have to do the pressing, and then it goes into the first pit,
And
and then
then
it
it
goes
goes
into the second one.
then it goes into the pit, right?
Says the Gemara, now the next case of the Mishnah, which is going to be the exact same discussion, is halamatan shel zeitim. It's referring to the vat of olives. Says the Gemara again, you need many steps here. Hamechusar michmar. The first step is they have to get nice and warm and soft, and that's they have to sit there and stew. And ayula lebe dapi, and you have to bring them up to the olive press. I guess dapi is the word we use for olive press. And then lemedash, then you have to actually press them, and then mingad. And then you have to draw them out of the press into the pit where you're going to store them, into the bar. Says the Gemara, it's four steps. Tani Rabbi Chia, well, it's referring to commercial zaitim, where actually they already are warming up, right? They're already the second step in that process where the zaitim are already stewing for a while. Then you can purchase them because there's only three steps left. That's why, but there's three steps. So you could tlat. And again, the same answer that we said before. Ba'atrab dahu dezavin hahu mingaid. The one who actually buys them is the one who, nagir, I guess is the word here, is the one who actually draws them out of that first pit into their barrels or into the other pit. And so therefore, it's only two steps according to Rav, and that's why it is permissible to sell it. Of course, according to Shmuel, none of this is a problem, because since these are all actions that are done by the owner, right, they're biyadav, you can always do this, then none of it matters. You can have five steps and you're allowed to sell it. Where am I? Al beitim shel yotzer. Okay, so the next case in the Mishnah was you are a yotzer, you're a potter, and you obviously don't have bowls yet, right? You want to sell 10 bowls to a person, but you don't have the bowls, but you have the beitzim, and the beitzim are literally means eggs, but obviously it's not natural eggs. It's little clumps, little of egg-shaped parts of clay, which if you're a potter, you can turn those into a bowl, right? So once the clay is already there, that's enough. Says more, but still, it's a lot of steps from a ball of clay into a pot, right? Amai. Hamechusar lifufi. You have to do lifufi, okay? Lifufi literally means rolling, right? You have to put them into the right size, right? You have this clump of clay, but if you need a bowl, it's going to be a very big bowl if you use too much clay, right? So you have to know the exact size. And yabushi, then you have to dry it out. I guess you have to dry it a little bit before, dry it out once it's made already, right? Once it's made into the shape that you're doing, you have to so I guess the fufi is really that first step, actually. The fufi is making it into the object, right? So you're taking your ball and turning it into what you want it to be. And then you have to dry it out, right? You see, Rashi's a beautiful explanation. The fufi is malafifin havlad, right? That you basically beautify the child. That's what you're doing for your object. Yabushi, you have to let it dry out, which I guess was a process you had to do before you fired it in the kiln. And then ayula la'atuna, then you have to put it into the kiln, right, to burn. Lemisraf, then, so this might be a fourth step, sorry. You have to then actually heat up the kiln and burn it. And then you have to take it out of the kiln, which of course is a step. I know I did pottery as a kid. That was always where things broke, right, when you were removing them. Well, the makebach, you then have to take it out, which all requires skill, and they're all steps in which something could go wrong. So you got 5 steps. So how could you sell? And it's just where, well, you're right, but obviously we're talking about a case where there are a couple of those steps already taken care of. You go into malafafa vivushi. No, you basically already shaped, let's say, the bowl, and it's dried out. So you go to the store and they've got all these sort of unfired bowls in the window, and you say, I want to buy 10 of them, right? So there's still 3 steps, as the Gemara. You still have got 3 steps. You got to bring it up to the flame. You got to turn on, you got to bring it into the kiln, you got to burn the kiln, you got to heat the kiln, and you got to take it out of the kiln. Answers the Gemara. It's talking about a case, again, where the buyer does the last step. Ba'atra dahu dezavan hu demebak. The one who buys the pot is the one who takes it out of the kiln. So basically, the person who's selling it only has two steps to do, which is putting it into the kiln and heating up the kiln. So that's two steps. And according to Rav, that's not a problem. And the next case was, what about sid, right? So sid means like plaster, material that you're building with. And obviously that says the Mishnah, once it's misha yashkenu b'kivshan. Once you've put it, yashken means to sink something in, to drop it in to the kiln, right? The kivshan, the oven. Says Gemara, but still, there's a bunch of steps needed before this sid is going to be useful for building your house. Hamechusar miklei, it's missing a step of miklei, which means to burn it, to heat it up, which I guess turns it into the material that's going to be useful, and afuke, and then you've got to take it out of the oven, and medak, and then you have to grind it up in order to make the paste that's going to, I guess, be added with water and turn into sid, right? So you've got to do three steps still. And says the Gemara, well, you're right, but again, it's where the person, who does who dying, the guy who buys it does the last step. So you basically sell your sid as an unfinished product. That's the norm. And since that's the norm, that's considered to be 100% acceptable. And there's only two steps missing according to Rav, and therefore, according to everybody, and therefore, according to Rav, you're allowed to sell it. Ask the Gemara, or Shmuel, according to Shmuel, says that anything that's in your hand to do, you can sell. Why does it have to say sid once you put it in the oven? Right? Even if you didn't put it in the oven, it should be fine because that's one more step. It adds a fourth step, let's say, or third step, but it's a human step. The guy who's selling it can put it into the oven. According to Shmuel, it's never a problem. Answers the Gemara, you're right. You don't have to. It means misha ra'oi l'shako b'kivshan. It means once you've put together however they made sid, right? You put together whatever raw materials of sand and plastic. I have no idea how you make it, but whatever you put together, whatever your raw materials, once that's mixed together and it's ready to be put into the kivshan, that already is called something that you can sell. And finally, the last case in our Mishnah that we're going to go through was beitzim shel yotzer, right? Well, actually, we had this earlier, right? So we discussed the shapes that were used by the potter. Tanu Rabbanan. Now, the Braita comments on our Mishnah, or comments more about the same thing said in our Mishnah, says the Tanakama, which is Rabbi Meir, Ein poskin ala beitzim shel yotzer ad asu. Says Rabbi Meir. Says Rabbi Meir, you're not allowed to pay money and set a price for future delivery of, bowls from a potter until they are asu, they are formed completely. Divrei Rabbi Meir, they have to be formed. They don't have to necessarily put in the oven yet or taken out of the kiln, but they have to be formed. Amar Rabbi Yossi, b'medvar memurim, says Rabbi Yossi, that's only true, but afar lavan. That's only true if you're talking about lafar lavan, which literally means white clay, right? Which is rare. It's hard to get white clay. And therefore, if it's not already there and formed, you can assume it's not easily available. There's no shar. This person can't get it. So you have to have it already. But if you're using what we call dark clay or sort of low quality clay, right, black clay, then can go in Kfar Chananya v'Chavrotel, like they have in Kfar Chananya, which is a city, and its neighboring places, or Kfar Shchin v'Chavrotel, they're poskin. There's always that clay. You can dig anywhere and find this cheap level clay in the areas they lived in. And then poskin afal b'shein lezeh yesh lezeh, because that's like, it's available everywhere. And so therefore, even if it's not available in one place, you'll get it from another place. So there, of course, there's basically no concern that it looks like interest. Now, a Maimar used to, where are we up to? We are 8 lines from the bottom. A Maimar yav zuzi michimayli afra. A Maimar used to give money to buy clay, basically buy future pots, from the moment the afar was brought into the house, right? Says right now, why was he relying on? What do you mean the afar was brought into the house? I mean, come on, Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir said it's not enough to have the clay, you have to make it into the form of the bowl. Amar ad asu, until you make the object. Rabbi Yossi says you don't even need to have it, because you can always dig somewhere and get it. You can always go to the neighbor and get it. It's everywhere.
They're talking about the black clay here?
Yeah, we're assuming we're talking about the black clay here. Answers the Gemara, Yolam ki Rabbi Yossi. He's going according to Rabbi Yossi. Uba'atra da Ameimer ashik afra. In Ameimer's neighborhood, which again, I have no idea where that was, right? Then it was very rare to find clay. So even though we might be talking about the dark clay, that's what we're sort of explaining, even in that neighborhood, wherever he lived, there was not a lot of clay. And so ashik means it was rare. So idma'ayli afra, if you have the clay, then samchadaita v'yavle zuze, v'ilo lo samchadaita. So therefore, you have to actually have it in order for it to work. And again, this gets back to the point we've made 100 times, right? Which is that it really depends on the local circumstances and what people are relying upon. Continues the Gemara, last line, 2 dots, second to last line. It said in the Mishnah, Posek imo al hazevel kol yemot hashana. If you want to buy dung, right? Zevel is garbage from someone, but you're using it obviously to your manure for your fields. Then manure you can buy all year round. People are always have manure. They always have animals. They always have, kitchen scraps. There's always stuff to buy. Then the Mishnah, remember, there were 3 opinions in the Mishnah. Then there was an opinion that said you can't, and there's an opinion that said you can. Says the Gemara, the third opinion in the Mishnah saying it's mutar all year round is the Tanakama. Amarava, no. Yimotag, turn the page. Yimotag Shamim Ika Beinayo. The difference between them is whether you're allowed to do it even in the winter, right? Because in the summer, according to the Tanakama said all year round, meaning even the winter. Then I forgot the next opinion, is Rabbi Yossi maybe said that no, only if you have it. If you don't have it, you can't sell it. Come to Chachamim and say no. During the summer, where there's dung, where it's everywhere, I guess because it sits around and it gets good manure, then you can sell even if you don't have it. During the winter, where it's less common to find good manure, I guess it's frozen, it's rainy, then you have to have it in order to sell it. That's the machloket. The next thing in the Mishnah said, and these are the next words, are posek imo kishar hagava. And this got very complicated. Remember, it means you can set a price at a high rate. And remember, the high rate means a cheap price, right? Remember, the rates always have to do with how many objects you get for $1, let's say, or for a sa, or for a shekel, let's say. So a shar gavoa means you get 6 for $1, so they're cheaper than a shar that's lower, namuch, which is 4 for $1. Okay, so shar gavoa is not a higher price; it's a higher shar, meaning a lower
It's amount of objects.
Correct. That's how they always
product.
The shar was the product, correct.
That's
So
what Rashi went to
Gavoa means more product for the same price, so cheaper price. Okay. So you can say to a person, I'm buying this from you. I'm buying my apples now. They cost, 25 cents each, just 4 for $1. But in 3 months, I want delivery. And if the price goes down, so you can now get 6 apples for $1, I want you to deliver at that rate. And that's permitted as long as you say it. Okay. Now, Ahu Gavra, let's see a case where this becomes very problematic. So there was a case, Ahu Gavra, there was a person, he got money to buy a dowry for his father-in-law, right? So meaning we're going to see the case, but his father-in-law basically said to him, look, I'm going to give you a dowry to marry my daughter. You want to buy, I don't know, your dowry is going to be a gold watch, right? So he gave him money in order to go buy this Nedunya, in order to buy it. And the son-in-law, who the father-in-law gave the money to, went to a seller and he gave the money for himself really, but on behalf of his father-in-law to get this gold gift, whatever it might be, okay? And he gave him $1,000 to buy whatever amount, diamond ring, let's say, but Lesov Zon Nedunya, but then it got cheaper. So before he took delivery 2 months later, the same gold watch now can sell for $800, right? So he doesn't want to pay him anymore $1,000. He wants to pay $800. So Atu the Kameder of Papa, so they came in front of Rav Papa and said,
Did he already give him the money?
Yep, he already gave the money for delivery.
So how do we obligate the seller of the item to give the money back to him? The seller said, you gave me 1,000 for this. That was the deal. I'm keeping the 1,000.
So the Mishnah said, if you recall, that you can give $1,000 for apples and say, I want delivery in 3 months, and if it gets cheaper, I want the cheaper price. And you have to do that. So that was a question here. Do you have to give him the cheaper price or give him back his money? So Amalei Sir Papa said, it depends on whether you made that as a condition. Remember, our Mishnah didn't say it's automatic. Our Mishnah said you're allowed to make that a condition. I pasakta kishara gavoa. If you made a deal and said, look, I'm paying you $1,000 for this watch, and if the price goes down, I want a discount, then shakalka ashta, then you get a discount like now. But ilo shakalki meikar. Otherwise, you're stuck with the original price.
Exactly.
It is true, but you have to make that condition. Amalei Rabbanan, Rav Papa, Sir Rabbanan said to Rav Papa, slow down. I don't understand our whole Mishnah. I don't understand this whole halacha. Ilo pasak. Let's say you didn't specifically make a deal and say, I am giving you this $1,000 to buy a watch. I want you to deliver it at my wedding in 2 months. And if the price of the watch goes down, I want a discount. right? So then you're saying you didn't make that deal. So shakel k'mei kara. So you've got to pay the original price, even though the watch has gone down in value. But why? All I did was give you money. Ma'ot ninu. I gave you $1,000, but ma'ot lo kanu, right? If you recall, we had a whole discussion. Forget about rebit, which is a discussion we've had for the last 2 weeks. But before rebit, we discussed the whole question about whether it's in fact a kinyan. And the halacha was, the Tanakama, the primary opinion was, ma'ot lo kanot, that just giving money is not a kinyan. Remember, we had a reason, because maybe midorite that's not a kinyan, or because there's a takana, shema yomunis rufuch chitacha ba'aliyah, right? If I give you money, then you're not going to take care of the watch, and you're going to let it burn and destroy it. So therefore, they made a kinyan, and ma'ot not kanot. So therefore, I gave you $1,000, but that's meaningless. Let me pull out of the deal now. I never made a deal with you. Amrului said back to him, no, you're right. Ma'ot are not kanu. But you know what? I meant to say it's true. You can pull out of the deal. But remember, there's a curse, right? There's a curse of misha para if you give money to buy something and then you say, I changed my mind because it got cheaper. So what I'm saying is, you can pull out of the deal. But if you pull out of the deal, you accept on yourself the curse of misha para, which you probably don't want to do. So it's true that the deal is not finalized, but there is a halachic responsibility. Answers the Gemara, says the Gemara, not answers, but pasak kishar gvoa, I don't understand. Let's say you did decide and you said, okay, I'm selling you the watch, right? Sorry, if you're pasak kishar gvoa, and then you say to him, look, I agreed to pay you $1,000 for this watch, but I said, if the price goes down, I want a better price. Then, and they pull out, they don't give it to you, then mocher kahader, right? Then it's the mocher who's pulling out, who's saying, I don't want to give you the lower price, and mekabel mocher mishapara. Then the mocher is if he doesn't give it at the lower price, he's over mishapara. But ilo pasak, if you don't make that deal, meaning you didn't say, if it goes down in price, I'm going to pay you the cheaper price, then you've got to pay the higher price. And if you pull out of that, lokech kahader, it's the buyer who says, I no longer want to do this deal, give me back my money. And then he is chayav, mikabel lokech mishapara. So then the buyer, in this case, the son-in-law, is mikabel mishapara, because he gave money for a deal. The money is not kona, but does induce a responsibility. And if you pull out of it, you're over that responsibility. Amalei Ravina Rav Papa. Now said Ravina Rav Papa, I don't understand this whole halacha. Mimai, how do you know? Remember, we had a machlokin in our Mishnah about whether if you make a deal, if you need to make the deal that I'm going to pay a lower price, that's when it works. But if you don't make the deal, it doesn't work. Or Rabbi Shimon, who said no matter what, even if you don't say explicitly, I want to get the cheaper price, everybody understands that whenever you give money for a future delivery, you want the cheaper price if the price changes, right? Says the Gemara, how do you know that the Rabbanan he depligi led Rabbi Shimon damri ma'ot lo kanu? That in this case it's the Rabbanan who argue with Rabbi Shimon that the halacha that you're talking about is of our Mishnah is the Rabbanan who argue with Rabbi Shimon and they say ma'ot lo kanu, right? But afilu hachi, even though ma'ot lo kanu, I pasak kishar gavoa shakel gedahashta, if you explicitly say I will pay you, I want to get the cheaper rate. Remember, shar gavoa always the cheaper rate. Then you get it at the cheaper rate. Ilo pasak shakal kidmei kara. And if you don't say it, then you have to pay the original rate. Maybe the explanation of our Mishnah is completely different. Dilma Rabbi Shimoni. Maybe in fact our Mishnah, which says that if you make a condition, it works, and if you don't make a condition, it doesn't work. Is Rabbi Shimon himself who says the Amar Ma'ot Konot, that money actually makes a kinyan. And the reason in the Mishnah that if you make a condition, it works, but if you don't make a condition, you can't back out of the deal, is not because of Misha Para, it's because the money itself actually makes a kinyan. So v'chi pasak kishar gavoa shakel kihashta. If you say, I will pay the cheapest rate, then of course you get the cheapest rate, because that was the condition you made when you bought the thing. Ilo pasak, and if you didn't say it, then shakel kimei kara. Then you've got to pay the original higher rate because you didn't say it, and mishum dekani lahu zuze, because the money made the kinyan. Maybe that's the explanation for our Mishnah. Aval Rabbanan, but maybe according to the Rabbanan, it's not mishapara. It's bein pasak, bein lo pasak, shakal ki hashna. Maybe according to the Rabbanan, there isn't even mishapara, because whether you say explicitly, I want the cheaper rate, or you don't, you should get the cheaper rate. Didate de inishatara zila, because we should assume potentially that everybody who buys something understands, I want to pay a cheaper rate if there's a cheaper rate available. And since according to the Chachamim, ma'ot lo kanu, the actual giving over the money does not make a kinyan, maybe you can consistently change your mind. Amar Le, so he said back to him, I didn't explain the Mishnah that way for a very obvious, simple reason. Because Rabbi Shimon does not hold that Ma'ot Kanu if the price can change. Amar to Amar Rabbi Shimon b'chad tara. Rabbi Shimon only says that money is kona if there's one rate, there's one price, meaning it's an item in which the price doesn't change from purchase to delivery. But when there's something that does change from purchase to delivery, betray tari mi amar. Rabbi Shimon never said ma'ot kona if it's an item like grain or things that change quickly in value, in which there's often different prices between the time where you bought it and the time where you took delivery. And you know how I know that? Because if you didn't say that Rabbi Shimon does not think that ma'ot kanot in that case, then how would you ever have a lokeach who's over mishapara? Mishapara belokeach, Rabbi Shimon metlei. You would never have mishapara by a lokeach, because if a purchaser buys something, right, in month A, and the price is $100, and he takes delivery 3 months later, and the price is $80. According to Rabbi Shimon, if you say that ma'ot are kona, then he has no way to pull out of that deal. If he has no way to, because he already bought it, you can't pull out of it. If you pull out of the deal, you're stealing, right? So how could you ever have mishapara? Mishapara is a case where you pull out of the deal. Halachically, you're allowed to pull out of the deal, right? Because you didn't technically make a kinyan, but we give you a curse. But according to Rabbi Shimon, in this case, if that's true, there's never a case of mishapara, because the lokeach can never pull out of a deal, right? Says, well, okay, well, maybe there's no such thing as mishapara by a lokeach, according to Rabbi Shimon. If you're going to say, according to Rabbi Shimon, maybe there is no mishapara in a lokeach, Latanya, but we have a braita which says, mikom makom kach halacha, that this is according to Rabbi Shimon, every case, this is the halacha, that the sale is not final, aval amru chachamim, that there's a curse on those who pull out. Mishapara, midar mabal, should punish this person. Now, what do you mean mikom makom? My mikom makom. It must be lav, deloshna lokeach, deloshna mocher, mikabala mishapara. That whether it's a seller who pulls out or a buyer who pulls out, if you pull out of a deal that has not been finalized, but which you verbally agreed to, you have to pay, you're chayav a curse of mishapara. And that's Rabbi Shimon. Ella says the Gemara, this in fact is the halacha. Ki ka'amar Rabbi Shimon, when Rabbi Shimon said that giving money is the same as making a kinyan, right? And you can never pull out, that was only bechad tara. That was if there's one fixed price, it's an item, it doesn't change in price, or it's a timeline that doesn't change. Ava betray tari lo amar, but if there's two prices for something, then even Rabbi Shimon does not say that money is kona. And so we're back to our explanation here, that in fact money is not kona in a case where the price changes, but you are over mishapara if you pull out without explicitly saying, I want the cheaper price. Just one final detail before we get to our Mishnah. I don't understand this whole case here. Why is there any mishapara when you have a messenger, right? Because this son-in-law was buying it for his father-in-law, right? The son-in-law said, I'll pay $1,000. At the end of 2 months, it's worth $800. So the father-in-law says, I'm not paying, right? So why is that mishapara? Because typically the shliach shavi makar, he made the son-in-law a shliach. And as we discussed earlier, you can't have mishapara by a shliach because the shliach says, the son-in-law says, I can't buy it because I'm a messenger for my father-in-law. My father-in-law said, I don't want you to buy it. And the father-in-law says, I'm not buying this because my son-in-law was an idiot and he got a bad deal and he didn't say, I want to pay the lower rate. So it's not on me. So each one can basically go back to the other one and say, they never made a proper deal. So there shouldn't be any mishapara. Answers Rav Ashi, sorry, Be'atra, Betagra de Zavinu Mazben. The case really here is where actually the son-in-law was a businessman. So he understood what he was doing. That's one explanation. And therefore, in fact, it's not like a regular shliach relationship where the father-in-law asked the son-in-law to do it for him. In essence, he hired the son-in-law to do it, in which case there's no way you can excuse it by saying he was a messenger. But that's just a small detail. But the final explanation is that you can make a condition, right? If you buy something and say, I'll take delivery in 2 months, but if the price goes down, I want a cheaper price, that is chal. That's 100% effective. If you don't make that condition, then according to the Chachamim, and Rabbi Shimon, it's not effective because although money is not kona in that situation, there is an impact called mishapara. And if you pull out of the deal, which you could, but if you pull out of the deal, you'll be accepting the curse of mishapara, of God who punished the Dar Mabul will punish that person as well.
So if he made no condition Oh, but if he made the condition, then he could pull out of the deal, right?
Correct. And there's not even Mishapara. Remember, the condition is
Right,
either
right.
give me the lower rate or give me back my money and give back $1,000 in that case.
What if the rate goes up?
What if what?
What if the rate goes up? Does the buyer then have to supply the remainder?
Correct. He absolutely does. That's the whole basis of this. That's why you're doing it. You're doing it because you assume you're accepting risk. And that again is our whole problem here, which is that you are giving money 3 months ahead of time. And the goal is that you're going to get a better rate in 3 months because it might go up. And remember, that's prohibited unless there's a rate right now where the seller, in theory, could just buy it now and hold on to it for 3 months and give it to you then.
Well,
Right?
wait, you said it's prohibited if the rate goes up, but he has to pay.
Not prohibited if there's a rate. If there's a market rate today, then it's not prohibited. Because the time I gave you the money, you could have bought it for this rate. The fact that in 3 months, the price of oil has doubled, right? And you have to lose your shirt to pay off the futures contracts that you committed to is not considered to be interest. And the reason it's not considered to be interest is because at the time that you agreed to this deal, it was doable. There was a availability of oil on the market for the rate that you agreed to. That's
So
called
should have,
Yatza Hashar.
so he should have demanded the oil today.
Well, I mean, he didn't want it today, but he could have purchased it today and saved it, in theory. Says the Mishnah. Let's try to do this Mishnah, even though we got 3 minutes till 8:30, but we'll get there. Malva Adam et Arisav Chitim b'chitim lezera. Let's say a person has sharecroppers, they make whatever agreement, you're giving back 30% of the grain, 50% of the grain, but they have no seeds. So it says the Mishnah, you can lend your sharecropper what do you call it, a sack of wheat to plant, and he'll pay you back at the end of the season, even though that seems like sa'ah b'sa'ah. But you can do it as long as it's for seeds, lezera, avalo lechol. But you couldn't do that to eat, right? I can't go to someone and say, here, I'm lending you a sack of grain for breakfast, and in a week from now, pay me back a sack of grain. Remember, you're not allowed to lend what's called sa'ah b'sa'ah. Now, but you can do it if it's for seeds. Rabbi Gamliel used to lend it to his sharecroppers for planting, but he would say to them, look, I will give you a better deal, right? If I gave it to you and it was expensive and it goes cheaper, or bezor, it's cheap and it gets more expensive, now tell me, I always give you only have to pay me back the cheap price. So if I give you a sack and it costs $50, and then the price of a sack goes down, it's $40, just give me back $40. And if the price of a sack goes up to $60, then you don't have to give me $60, you just have to give me back my $50 that I gave you. So you could just get the cheaper rate. Now, he didn't have to do that. It says the Mishnah, not because you have to do that, but because he was Rabbi Gamliel and he wanted to be machmir al atzmo, to avoid any sight that he was taking advantage of people. Tana Rabbanan says the Braita, Malva Adam et Arisav Chitim b'chitim lezera. It's a quote of our Mishnah. But when can you give your sharecroppers a sack of grain to pay you back a sack of grain? That's shelo yarad, where they didn't yet go and start working in the field. They haven't yet started working. Ava yarad, if they started working in the field, then it would be asur, right? It would be asur. We'll see a little bit in a second, but it would be asur in that case because it's already basically after the fact. They can do whatever they want with it, and they sort of have possession of the field. Let's keep going and we'll explain it, as Rashi says. Now, why did our Mishnah didn't mention anything about whether the sharecropper started working or didn't start working? And the Tana of the Braita, who said, oh, it depends on whether they started working or not. So what's the difference? Amar Rava, well, the reason is that they were referring to different local circumstances. Rav Idi Asbernile. Rav Idi explained this to me, said Rava. Ba'atra de Tana Didan, in the neighborhood and the social norm of the Tana of our Mishnah, there, Arisa Yahiv Bizra. There, the common thing was for the Aris to provide the seeds, okay? And so because the Aris provided the seeds, they're not considered to be working the field until they have seeds. Because since that's part of their responsibility, even if they go onto the field and they start bringing all their equipment and getting ready, the fact that they don't have seeds means that they didn't start their job yet. And so therefore, bein yarad, bein lo yarad, whether they went to the field or didn't go down to the field, kama de lo yahiv bizra, as long as they don't have seeds, and they're coming to you to say, can I borrow a container of seeds, then matzi misalikle, you can always kick them off the field. The rule was you hire a sharecropper until they start working. You can always cancel the contract and hire somebody else, right? And so therefore, because they haven't started, even though they went down to the field, because they don't have seeds yet, their job didn't start yet. The chikanachit, and when they ultimately go down to the field, right, then the batzim mehachikanachit. Then basically what's going to happen is you're going to reduce their payment as a sharecropper potentially because you gave them the seeds, and so that looks inappropriate. The Ba'atra de Tana Bra, but in the neighborhood of the Tana of the Braita, my Mari Ara Yav Bizra, the owner of the field was one who used to provide the seeds. And so therefore, in some cases, they didn't have to, but they could. So therefore, if the sharecropper, lo yarad, if he hasn't yet gone down and started preparing to work the field or even working the field, then matzi misalikli, then the owner of the field is allowed to kick him away. And if he doesn't kick him away, kikanachid, the batzim hachikanachid, you're basically potentially getting profit because of the seeds. But yarad to lo matzi misalikle, once he went down in a situation where you can't kick him off the field, then it would be asur. Because basically at that time, since you can't kick him off the field, right, you can't say, I'm giving you the seeds as part of our agreement in the sharecropping deal, right? And I'm going to deduct it from your sharecropping agreement. He already started his sharecropping agreement, and you can't kick him off the field. He gets the right to work that field. So now, why am I giving him seeds? It's a straight out loan, right? And if it's a straight out loan, it's not part of a business deal. A loan of sa'ah b'sa'ah is prohibited. So if you give him the seeds before he's officially working for you, then the seeds are part of the contract of him being a sharecropper. And basically, he's a sharecropper. He pays you 50% of the grain minus the amount of the seeds, right? So it's a business deal and it's permitted. If he's already started working, then it's a loan and that's where it's prohibited.
What kind of work is he doing though? Doesn't have seeds.
So he's not doing any work actually, but he went down to the field. He already moved in. He brought his animals there. He brought his plows there. He marked out the field. Whatever other work you could do a lot before you put in seeds, right? You start working the field.
So you're paying him for his time doing what he's
You're paying
doing.
him for everything, right? From nuts to
Everything.
bolts.
Whatever
He
he's
gets
doing there, you're paying him for that. You hired him on June 1. You don't give him the seeds till June 15th, but he's doing something. You're paying him
correct.
for that time.
That's what you're allowed to. He started working. He started preparing the field. Tanura Banal, let's read two more lines. Omer Adam Lechavero, a person can say to his friend, look, Halveni kor chitim, lend me a core, a container, right, a size of grain, of wheat, the kotzetz lo damim, and let's set a price. Today, a container of wheat costs $1,000. If huzlu, if let's say the price of wheat goes down, then noten lo chitim, then he did a great deal. He gives him the chitim, even though they're cheaper, because that's what he agreed to give. But hukru, it's a loan, right? He gives him back. Hukru notain mayhem. If it gets more expensive, then he pays back the $1,000. That doesn't make any sense. Hello, katsatz. You said, right? Why would you get a cheaper rate, right? You said I'm giving to you at a fixed rate of $1,000 per course. What do you mean if it gets cheaper, you can just give back the chitin at the cheaper price? It says hello, katsatz. I don't get it. Why would he be allowed to give him chitim at a lower price? He already said, I'm giving it to you at this rate. Rav Sheshet, no, you're right. It's a mistake or it doesn't mean that. Hachi kamar. Im lo katsatz. That's what I mean. If you don't say, I specifically want it at this price, then you basically have the ability to go either way. If the price of wheat goes down, then you could just give him chitim, notel chitav. But hukru notain mayhem. If it goes up in value and it would cost you more money to give back chitim now, then you could just give back the value that you initially set up as the value of wheat at the time that you borrowed it. And that's what you should do, because otherwise it looks like you're giving ribit if you give extra money. Tomorrow we will get to the final Mishnah. I think of it, I know of Ezu Nashech, which we've referenced many, many times, talking about this question of sa'ah b'sa'ah. And obviously it will be a summary of many, many things we've already learned. So
this case is not sa'ah b'sa'ah, the last case, if the price goes up or down.
it is sa'ah b'sa'ah. That's why, unless you specifically set up the money, right? So if you connect it to the amount it costs, you explicitly say that, then you're allowed to do it. If you don't say it, then it's sa'ah b'sa'ah.
If you don't connect it to the money.
Correct.
Right. So if you connect it to the money, if the price,
Chatzatz, meaning you associate it with that amount.
right, so if the price goes up, then he just gives him the money back.
Correct, because if you gave back the wheat, it would be sa'abasa, basically,
And
essentially.
if the price goes down, he could give the wheat, the original wheat.
Correct.
But isn't that sabasa?
So again, in this case, so sabasa is where you end up paying rebate. You're paying extra.
Oh, so in this case, he's not paying extra.
Right, it's paying less.
He's giving back the wheat, even though the value went
It's gone
down.
down. Correct.
And the owner agrees to that.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Have a great day. Thanks for learning. I'll see you next week. Wait, Ken, let me just ask you a quick question before we hang up. Next week, can we do Sunday in the afternoon or in the evening, like before Mincha, like 7 o'clock? And I'll put it on the WhatsApp just to check.
What time is Mincha?
I have to check. Whatever, we'll do it 45 minutes or 50 minutes before Mincha. If that works. Mincha will probably be around 7:45, 7:50. So whatever, we'll find the time, but sometime
On Sunday evening.
Sunday evening, not Shabbos, yeah.
Theoretically,
Okay.
I mean,
Theoretically, we'll discuss
not-
further. I'm not saying you're committed yet.
I can't necessarily tell you with certitude today, but it's possible.
Okay, I'll take it possible. We'll discuss more, okay? Have a good week. Shabbat
Okay.
tov.
Sure.